the Cybersecurity Case Method Workshop, and I have put together a sort of a tentative schedule for the workshop. I also made a note it's likely to vary, and this is almost certainly going to be the case, but we'll try to start on time and at least start with some introductions. And before I go into the introductions, let me just give you an overall agenda of what we're planning. First, we'll just have some brief introductions because I'd like to know why people are in the workshop and what we ought to focus on. Then we're going to have an introduction to what case studies are, because there are lots of different types of case studies, and one of the things that I have found is that a lot of times people do not necessarily understand what type of cases they're talking about. We will then have a short break, but feel free to walk in and out as needed, since the odds of this actually happening at 11:05 are fairly small. Then we'll talk about the case writing process. From 12 to 1, it's kind of lunch on your own. Now, in the afternoon session, we're going to try something brand new that I've never really tried before. I'm going to be giving you 3 first pages of case studies, 2 of which have been more or less completed, and 1 of which is actually still in the process of being written. And we have either the participants or the authors of the cases here. 2 of them are with us, Collier and Manish Agrawal, and Leonid Petrovsky, who, if you've been to this conference before, many of you have already met, is the subject of the 3rd case. And what we'll do is I'll give you the first pages, well actually I already have, and you'll read over them, and then we'll have a discussion about what is interesting about a case like this, what might need further development, and we will actually talk with the folks who are involved in the case writing process to get a sense of what that process was like. And these are all 3 of them are cybersecurity cases. At the very end of the workshop, I will ask each of you to fill out an online evaluation. You should be able to do it with a cell phone, you should be able to do it with a computer, and I'll also provide a link if you don't happen to have either here. This is very important for us because this workshop, a lot of the work was funded by a National Science Foundation award, and they like to see that we're actually trying to communicate the stuff that we're working on in these projects. So that's kind of an overview. Now, a couple of other things just for you to be aware of. You should all have one of these in front of your desk. If you don't, we've got extras. This contains all the material that I will be projecting for the workshop. It's yours. Keep right on it. Do whatever you want. Now, in addition, you have a 1-page thing, and this refers to a Canvas site that I set up. And you can see what this site looks like here. This is open access. What you'll have to do is I've given instructions as to the specific code so that you can log on to the site. I will keep it open for years so you can come back. And all of the materials that you have are also available on this particular site. In addition, this site has a lot of links to YouTube videos. For example, when I talk about the case writing process, I will talk about a checklist that I've given you very briefly, depending upon the time. Come on in. If you come here, what you will find is there's a whole bunch of videos. Probably, I think this one's maybe 2 hours worth of videos that cover that material in much more detail. Because frankly, I'm not that wild about lecturing in a workshop like this. I would much prefer to have it more interactive. So basically, you have the links on the 1-page guide, which looks a little bit like the cover sheet of the other, so don't think they're the same. And it also contains a PDF of my book, Informing with the Case Method. Everything in this workshop is open access, so you may feel completely free to share it with anyone. So if you've got someone you'd like to share this material with, you can give them the sheet, tell them how to get into the workshop material. The videos are all available on YouTube, but I tried to organize them. that's the key thing I wanted to talk about, workshop organization. My name is Grandon Gill. I am a professor at the University of South Florida. I am also the academic director of our Doctor of Business Administration program, which is a program specifically for working professionals. We are privileged to have many of these professionals sitting in the room with us today. If you would all just raise your hand so people know who you are. Cool. Our DBA program requires at least 12 years of work experience, and most of the people who enroll in the program are CEOs of their own company, vice presidents of larger organizations, entrepreneurs. We have a few people from academic institutions. It's a great program, and on Thursday afternoon, I'll be talking a little bit more about that program in a plenary session. With that, my background, I am not an expert in cybersecurity. My experience is mainly in the area of case writing, and one of the things that got me very excited about this workshop was the opportunity to find some people who actually know something about cybersecurity to help me out as I try to develop these cases for the National Science Foundation grant. So that my hope is that many of you will stay in touch with me after the workshop. If you've got ideas about good sources for case studies, I will be delighted to work with you to develop these case studies. My grant even has a bit of a travel budget, so I'm not adverse to going somewhere if there's a good case writing opportunity. And by the end of this workshop, you should have a pretty good idea of the types of things that we're looking for. My background is one showing virtually no initiative whatsoever. I did my undergraduate degree at Harvard, then I went on to my MBA at Harvard, and then I did my DBA at Harvard. But I grew up at Harvard because my father was a professor there, so it was literally a complete lack of initiative. But Harvard's business school, the MBA program, the DBA program, is focused around the case method. So when you do an MBA at Harvard, you basically discuss 900 cases over the course of a 2-year period and do almost nothing else. There might be 12 lectures sprinkled in over the course of the entire 2 years. So I developed a real passion for cases and case writing as an educational tool, and I've done a lot of research in that area, which is probably why we got the grant. By the way, Manish Agrawal is my co-PI on this grant, which is one of the reasons why we got it, because he actually knows something about cybersecurity. So what I thought I might do now is just briefly go around the room and have everyone give like a 30-second introduction to yourself, why you're here. It's perfectly okay to say, because there was nothing else going on in the conference. So I can live with that. Hopefully we'll get you interested, and so maybe Manish, we'll start with you.
Hello, I'm Manish Agrawal. I'm a faculty member at USF in the College of Business, in the same department as Grandon. I've been there since around 2001. I shared Grandon's enthusiasm about case writing, case development. It has been one of the things I have wanted to do for a very long time. So whenever Grandon invites me for one of these projects, I'm really happy to say yes. And Grandon has been a great advisor in helping me refine my case writing process. I'm also the academic director of our MS in MIS program at USF in the College of Business. It's a reasonably successful program. We have a lot of international students there, so it's a slightly different audience, and our focus there is a little more technical. And in terms of teaching, I teach a lot of the technical classes at USF, web applications development, cybersecurity, and so on. And I was also involved with with our Florida Center for Cybersecurity, helping them getting their NSA Center for Academic Excellence designation. So I've been involved with the teaching side of this for some time, and now with Grandon, hopefully a little bit of case writing as well.
Okay, we got plenty of extra handouts, by the way, so what we can do is maybe as people come in, I'll put some over here by the corner just to, you can just pass these to people as they come in, one of each. Thank you. All right, please, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Octavio Orozco. I earned a doctorate degree in the National University of Mexico, and I am pursuing a dream, kind of say that how to move or how to propitiate the young students who are unemployed in Mexico, most of them, as I will present in some other places. And the idea is how to move them to launch new enterprises to develop software. So that software should be of help to bring the other Mexico, the underdeveloped Mexico, towards a more or higher productivity. So that's what I am trying to do. I am here because I am interested in building use cases, case studies for these entrepreneurs.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Hi, I'm Robert Denz. I'm a PhD candidate at Dartmouth College. After leaving RPI, I spent 5 years in the cybersecurity industry before pursuing my PhD. I've worked heavily in hypervisor type 1 development and kernel development. A lot of my work is related to multi-core technologies and leveraging them in different ways to protect the cloud against cybersecurity threats.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Joshua Adams, and I'm a faculty member at St. Leo University outside of Tampa. I spent the last 20 years in the Coast Guard healthcare field, and I help with the cybersecurity program at St. Leo University, helping develop that. I'm here to actually just kind of expand my knowledge.
Cool. Thank you.
Morning. My name is Aman Bisala. I'm from the University of Quebec, Canada. My interests are on the network security. I work on the vehicle network security, but I have a new thesis of research about the cloud on the net. And I'm here to know more about cloud privacy.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you.
Alejandro Villegas, I'm a law student at Yale University School of Law. I've been a cybersecurity engineer for about 10 years. Currently working for Microsoft, and I have previously worked for HP and some other IT companies. I found the workshop kind of great, so I decided to give it a shot.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Manish. I'm a doctoral candidate at University of Alabama, Huntsville, and right now I'm working on the privacy and privacy security and the psychology security attacks. And the project one of the projects we are working on is to building the bridge or training the students to between the resources of the security of the software security and of the practical development for the students. Thank you.
I'm Doug Straka with the University of South Florida, Executive Doctor of Business Administration program. And again, I work at U.S. Central Command out of MacDill Air Force Base in the area of security cooperation. This is the primary reason for coming here is my first chance to get my feet wet, coming to an academic conference. I've been to a number of trade and professional conferences, but again, to more widen my perspective in academia.
Thank you.
Kevin Dollifer, also in the USF DBA program. I have little experience with the case study, case method. It is a big part of our program, so I'm here to learn all I can about how to develop a case study and then how to analyze case studies.
Thank you.
I'm Ed Fulford, also a member of the 2018 cohort at University of South Florida DBA program. I'm about a 30-some-odd year practitioner in information security, run several large programs for companies like British Telecom, Delta Airlines, and the like. I'm here to assist Grandon if needed, and also to get my first dip into an academic conference.
I'm Mojo Lavender. I'm also a DBA student at USF, and I'm attending as part of the course in order to learn more about case study development and cybersecurity.
Rolf Dornberg, I'm from the University of Applied Sciences, Northwestern Switzerland. I'm here for the first time, and I'm interested to see what's going on in this conference, but I can learn.
Hi, I'm Soren Nistor. I'm a PhD candidate at the Bundeswehr University, Munich, Germany. I'm focused more in analysis and threat in the transportation networks, and I'm pretty sure that cybersecurity has something also to do with it.
Thank you.
My name is Sylvia Stavridina. I'm coming from Biblioteca Alexandrina from Egypt, and teach and to engage children in education. And I am doing also like some kind of cooperation between the Bibliotheca Alexandrina and other private schools in Alexandria to implement this kind of new, it's not new, but for Egypt it's new to have this digital creative education through arts, and how to encourage children to learn more and to understand complicated concepts and academic concepts. And I'm also doing some programs in Bibliotheca Alexandrina in giving art appreciation for children. So.
Well, you may find some interesting things here in the case study area, because in fact, I have a case study that I developed with a faculty member like 10 years ago, not in the cybersecurity area, but basically in the art area. There's a lot of opportunities there, so hopefully you'll find something useful. And
I'm sure, because at the same time I'm a librarian, so we use this kind of cybersecurity in our library, because we are trying now to implement this digital collection. So it goes both ways.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Sergey Zikov from Moscow, Russia. I hold a PhD from Moscow Engineering Physics Institute, which is a nuclear research university. And well, my official title is Associate Professor in Cryptology and Discrete Mathematics, which deals with cybersecurity. I'm not involved in that much. I'm actually teaching software engineering for a while. My primary employer is Higher School of Economics, and recently I've been to Carnegie Mellon as a visiting faculty. They do a lot of research in learning by doing approach. So that is an interesting basis to share, speaking about case studies and things like that. I've actually shared a very interesting case study. We're doing this with Grandon.
Yes.
Concerning Innopolis. This is a very exciting thing, building an IT city from scratch. So, well, it's fairly successful, but well, it's challenging, and we're working on that, and hopefully, this is my primary reason for coming here. I've just finished a book for Springer on crisis management and knowledge transfer. Knowledge transfer and how it happens in this crisis environment is a challenge, and it's a great thing to study together.
Fantastic. Thank you, sir.
Hi, my name is now Hiro Fukunaga. I'm come from Toyohashi University in Japan. I'm not so, my background is not about cybersecurity, so I learned it by attending this workshop. Thank you.
Thank you. Here, we'll go to the back row now, if you would care to.
My name is Grandon. I'm also wrote from Switzerland, from the University of Applied Sciences, University of Switzerland. My field is more the design field. Actually, I'm specialized on visualizing complexity. So actually, it's a very broad area. It's very universal. We are dipping in all the possible fields. So I'm very curious what's coming up.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Randy Simpson, Institute for Defense Analyses. I usually come to these conferences and present some small aspect of cybersecurity, which I've been working on the last 15 years. Tomorrow I'll talk about the 14-year evolution, including something I think all of you will like is a cross-disciplinary case study representation of cybersecurity.
Kevin Foltz, also from Institute for Defense Analyses, and I'll be presenting another piece of what Randy and I have been working on for, I haven't been doing this 14 years, but it's getting pretty close, so it'll be another piece presented.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Stian Nielsen. I am a PhD student from Chalmers University of Technology in Sweden in the Department of Architecture, and I'm actually from the background of architecture, and I'm using machine learning and big data, sensor data to try to understand what's happening in the built environment and try to predict on trends and phenomena to guide and shape the built environment.
Thank you.
Lunsford. I'm from Dayton, Ohio, United States. I am a professor at Wright State University, and I'm involved in electrochemical modules, trying to teach students how to engage into electrochemistry. And so case studies have always been an interest of mine when I heard Grandon, so I'm on here today and learn into what he's doing and how he's using his case studies writing. And I've read his book, but I'm in the process of trying to put case studies together to help even freshman chemistry learn better. So that's why I'm here today. And I'll be presenting as well tomorrow and Friday at the plenary session on some activities that I had created for our students at Wright State.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Agrawal. I'm from Class University of Technology in Japan. My tema is Flying Artificial Intelligence. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Agrawal. I am from Collier Institute of Applied Mathematics. And I have some education activity with several high school in Moscow. And my interest is to recognize the possibility to involve a lot of students, PhD students, to internet communication with science interest. So I try to recognize what is possible, maybe use this.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Valerie, and I'm also a USF student of Grandon's. And I don't know very much at all about cybersecurity. I'm learning a little bit about case study, and my area is a functional software specialist consultant, so helping users learn how to utilize software.
Robin Lord, also a candidate, DBA from USF. I co-owner of a business, international business in Naples, Florida. I don't have a cybersecurity background, but I want to know more. But I did have a lot of case studies with my executive MBA at Florida Gulf Coast University in Fort Myers. And I definitely enjoy case studies here to gain exposure to all that.
Thank you.
My name is Denise Gravatt. I'm also a candidate in the DBA program with Professor Gill. And I'm here primarily to learn a little more about cybersecurity, but also to start my climb towards the 900 case studies that he has already accomplished. So I think we've got 3 or 4, 6, so we're under 10 at this point in our program. But here's another opportunity. I work at Florida Atlantic University, and I work in the School of Accounting and Executive Programs there. We have a concentration in forensic accounting, and they're also developing other programs to work for data analytics and looking to follow the money. And so cybersecurity is another interest of theirs. So I'm just going to listen a little bit about that subject on the professional end, and then share anything that I have, and possibly have people for Grandon to talk to for case studies.
Thank you.
Hello, good morning. My name is Detlef Doher. I'm coming from Germany, from the University of Applied Sciences in Offenburg. And I'm a lecturer in information technology and geographical information systems. And furthermore, I'm managing my own company, which is the company for technology and know-how transfer to the industry. And frankly to say, this is the reason why I'm here.
Okay. Thank you.
My name is Shane Collier. I've got a very eclectic background, from Antarctic researcher to the elite technologist that brought companies on the scale of 3M and Howard and KBR to the internet, to entrepreneur. I'm currently the managing member of Consolidated, where we focus on the impact of international culture on IT. I've got 30 years background in virtually all areas of IT, from operations to software development to process to basically beginning to end. I've been very fortunate in that. As far as relationship to case, I recently graduated from USF's MIS program, so I seem totally incoherent or have a problem. I'm used to gentlemen. It's a wonderful program, and the people in the DDA program, wonderful ride. I have a unique perspective in that I was able to take Grandon's live capstone course for many case studies, and then the following semester be the TA for his online course, and seeing how those two corresponded and complemented each other. Since then, I've had the opportunity to develop a case study and lead membership, and I'm here here later this afternoon to share that case study. So thank you all.
Thank you. Here, go back here.
Okay, thank you. Good morning. My name is Jesus Vivanco. I come from Mexico, Aguascalientes University. My line of research is the culture and small business survival. I come here to share with you and to learn from you all the strategies we can apply for surviving enterprises, because in Mexico, the small and medium-sized enterprises are the most significant number of enterprises. So that is the basic economy in Mexico, and I think around the world the same situation. So I appreciate the invitation for to be here, and I hope learn from you, and thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Minnie Abuja. I'm also a USF DBA student. Hi, everyone. I am here because one, it's a requirement.
we don't require this particular conference. We don't require.
I'm here because cybernetics, I guess cybersecurity is very important these days, especially with the explosion of internet. But it would be nice to know how we are trying to manage all the things that are happening and all the, I guess, acts of threatening each country and every country, how all of them is more now, our focus is more on internet, cyber space. So it'll be interesting to know what we're doing here for cybersecurity.
Well, thank you so much, everyone. You know, I just want to make one comment at this point. I am so impressed by Najib's ability to put together a group as diverse and accomplished as this group. And I think he deserves a round of applause. Thank you so much. Well, of course, we're already behind schedule, but that pretty much, but I was not going to interrupt these introductions for anything, because actually this is, even with high expectations for Najib, the level of expertise and the diversity of background in this group means that you're going to be able to help me a lot. And of course, this is all about me. Just kidding. Not really, but... All right, so the first thing I really feel I always need to do, and this is always a significant point, is just help people understand better the variety and nature of case studies. Because when I say a case study, it can mean an entirely different thing to me than it does to the person I'm communicating with. I got a graphic example of this when I was working on my doctorate in the 1980s. I was working with a company founded by Pat Winston. For those of you in artificial intelligence, you've probably heard of him in the machine learning area. He was one of the early proponents of AI at MIT. So I was working with him. He was on my dissertation committee. And as we're working with his company which was developing AI tools for gate scheduling at airlines, we mentioned to him that we thought that we might end up writing a case study. Well, he turned absolutely white as a sheet, and he says, I hope not. Well, it turns out to him, a case study is what you write after a catastrophe happens. Well, that's an entirely different perspective than the perspective that I had on a case study, which is something you write about a decision that needs to be made. Those of you who look at websites where they've got case studies, well, those are typically marketing tools. They're stories told trying to market a product. Then you've got best practice case studies. Then you've got case studies in engineering, which are essentially very complex word problems. So what I want to do is I want to try to sort out this and then emphasize what we're going to be talking about in this workshop is discussion cases. So let's see if so at any rate, so the overview is first I'm going to talk a little bit about research cases, then I'll talk about the different types of teaching cases, and then what we're going to do is we're going to have an exercise, and now, if you have a phone or a computer, you'll be able to participate, otherwise you will just observe, and the idea is we're going to try to identify whether a topic would make a good discussion case or not. So, research cases. The idea of a research case is essentially to build theory. In the social sciences, and business falls into social sciences, a lot of what we do is really not that receptive to kind of numerical computation. So, you can use surveys and you can use mathematics, but a lot of times it doesn't produce theory that is particularly relevant to practice. I mean, in economics, you have to make so many assumptions before you start applying the math that it's pretty hard to generalize from the mathematical description of an economy to the actual practice. And I think we see this as people flail around trying to figure out how to get economies to work better. In the case of the social sciences and even in psychology, yes, you can do lab experiments, but the replication of those lab experiments is very, very problematic. And the Science magazine recently published an article where they took the top 100 classic psychological experiments and tried to replicate them. And the success rate was well under 50%. Now, what a case study does is it looks at a complex situation and allows you to bring in any type of information you can in a process called triangulation. So you're not limited to a particular survey. You're not limited to a particular set of interviews. You are not limited to archival documents. Instead, your job is to try to make sense of all these things. And so in a research case study, what you're normally doing is you're trying to tell a story about cause and effect. We all know the difference between correlation and causation. And we don't always practice it, but we know there's a difference. But in a case study, what you would do is if you happen to see a correlation, then you try to dig deeper to determine if there really is a correlation, a causation, and try to analyze that fact and make a decision whether this is coincidental, whether A follows B or B follows A, and use every source of information you can. It's qualitative in the sense that you're never going to be able to prove something, but it allows you to make strong arguments. And research cases are almost always an attempt to relate a particular story or collection of stories, because a lot of times research cases will involve 2 or 3 different sites, and relate them to some theory, or else they may simply be a rich description which we then try to say, this is the basis for proposing a particular theory. Those are called exploratory case studies. There are lots of designs for research case studies. There's a single case design. That can be very good to provide a counter example to an existing theory. You could say, okay, well, there's this theory out there which we accept, but in this case study, it clearly did not work that way. It could be a basis for proposing a new theory. You can have multiple case studies. In a multiple case studies, often what you're trying to do is you're trying to determine if 2 very different contexts seem to produce the same pattern, which suggests something that might be generalizable, or if 2 very, very similar contexts produce very different outcomes, which is basically saying, oh, there's a lot of limitations to generalizability in what we're doing. There's also the possibility of doing large sets of case studies where you actually have enough information so you can also do some statistical analysis of the cases as well as the qualitative analysis. But in any type of case research, there's always going to be a story that's being told. Now, I guess I sort of get ahead of myself. Characteristics of research cases. Big one's triangulation. We don't limit ourselves to any data. We use everything we can get our hands in, and part of the researcher's job is to synthesize that information. You normally have a strong tie into theory, either exploring or confirming, providing counterexamples. And in the case of business, research cases tend to get published in the same type of journal outlets as your other types of empirical studies or theory-building articles. So you'll find research cases side by side with other types of articles. They tend to be hard to write because the use of academic language tends to disrupt the story. You know, if you actually want to tell a story, it's nice to tell it in plain language that does not suck the will to live out of the reader. But many academics believe that if you do not suck the will to live out of the reader, you're not doing your job as an academic. So, needless to say, this is the opinion of Grandon. Gill and does not necessarily reflect the opinion of the college of business at the University of South Florida. So, but nonetheless, they can be very powerful. And if you look at a lot of the research that's done at places like Harvard Business School and Stanford, you will discover that they use case studies as powerful examples to illustrate the theory. Now, teaching cases have an entirely different purpose. Teaching cases are not to develop theory, they're to help students learn. And there's a whole variety of different types of teaching cases. Now, the type of case that I am going to focus on in this entire workshop is the discussion case. This is the type of case that Harvard Business School publishes. This is the type of case that you often see in executive programs and in MBA programs. I love this type of case, and I believe it can be much more widely used. I created a whole series of cases, for example, back about 10 years ago, specifically dealing with teaching situations, where the decisions being made were like, should I use clicker technology in my classroom? Or should I repeat an online exercise that went a little awry the first time I did it? And all of these involve decisions that need to be made. I think cybersecurity is a wonderful area for discussion cases because anytime I meet with a group of individuals involved in cybersecurity, they emphasize the interdisciplinarity of it. The fact is you cannot look at cybersecurity from a pure computer science technology focus. You cannot look at it from a pure psychology focus. You cannot look at it from a pure economic focus. You actually need to have all the different perspectives available to you as you involve situations. That's the heart of interdisciplinarity. The need for disciplines to communicate with each other. Not just divide the problem up into separate pieces and say, okay, you do your piece, I'll do my piece, and we'll never communicate. Now, I usually divide my discussion cases into long, which provides a full context of the situation. Most of the cases that I write are long cases, which is, in my case, probably 12 single-spaced pages of text, plus another 10 pages of exhibits or so. So you end up with something that's like 25 pages long. That's the reason I didn't give you the full cases in the packet, because you'd never be able to read them. I just gave you the first pages of some. On the website, however, on that Canvas site, you actually have full drafts of the cases that have in fact been released. Basically, I am almost always dealing with students who do not understand the context of a given situation. So I need to explain the industry, I need to explain the product, all these pieces of background that are important before you start making the decision. I'm working with South Africa on a Fulbright grant each summer now, helping their faculty develop cases. If they want those cases to be available to an international audience, they also have to spend a couple of pages talking about South Africa, because there are things in South Africa that are standard practice that would not make sense to a student in the US without that background explanation. I edited a book of cases written by Vietnamese faculty a couple of years ago. I actually made that contact at this conference with Matthews Nakoma. And every single one of those cases, we had to provide some background on Vietnam because our students could not probably tell you what continent Vietnam was in, much less where it would appear in a map. Of course, that's a problem with US students in general. Now, in a short case, you can provide a decision without much context. And if I were writing cases for a series of cybersecurity experts, then, for example, I wouldn't have a page and a half defining what malware is, because first off, they think I was an idiot. And they disagree with my definition, and basically they already know. So if you're dealing with case studies written for an audience who already has a specific background, you can make it much, much shorter and really focus on the decision. Now, the key thing about a discussion case is the focus is on unmade decisions, and that's what we're going to look at in the exercise. Now, another type of case is the example case. This tells a story about cause and effect, which is exactly what a research case does, but it pulls out all the theory. We don't worry about the theory. We just tell an interesting story and let the audience, draw conclusions for it. It can be a way of making theory clearer. So when I tell a war story, that's an example case. When I use a specific, when in the afternoon, when we're talking about the development of discussion cases, each one of those is in a sense an example case where we're talking about the whole process from beginning to end. A discussion case stops before a decision is made. An example case gives you the whole story, which means the example case is a lot more satisfying to read. And so if you've got a case study up on the up on your marketing thing, you don't leave it with a decision that needs to be made. You tell the whole story and you try to build a case for cause and effect. We used this product and we had this great success as a result of using this product. Now, another example of a teaching case is a walkthrough case. A walkthrough case gives you a rich problem-solving context to guide people through a challenging problem. One of the things that you often run into when you're dealing with technical subjects like engineering, mathematics, and so forth, is that when you give someone the equations, they can solve them, but when you present it in a real-world context, they cannot map that real-world context into the tools that they have learned. So under those circumstances, a walkthrough case basically gives you a case in real-world terms, and then very often an instructor will walk the class through the process of solving it. And the important thing, an important difference between a walkthrough case and a discussion case is whereas a discussion case almost never has a right answer. Because in the real world, there tend to be good answers and bad answers to complex problems, but there's very rarely a right answer. What is a good answer and what's a bad answer can vary considerably based upon the context. The example that I like to use is garlic a good ingredient? Well, yeah, garlic's a good ingredient maybe if you're making lamb 99% of the time. It's probably not a good ingredient when you're making dessert custards. So the answer is always it depends, and it depends upon the context. And so I almost never use a discussion case where I would imagine that one of the options presented is right. Rather, I like to have a series of plausible options, and in some cases, the participants have to decide on specific details that aren't included in the case to determine which option is the better fit. Whereas with a walkthrough case, you're normally showing someone how to solve a problem the right way, and that's the big difference. If there's a right way, then this can be very appropriate. And an exercise case is just a walkthrough case that the instructor doesn't walk you through. So, you might give someone a walkthrough case or a couple of walkthrough cases, and then you would give them an exercise case. Okay, now you're on your own. Now you've got to do this. So these are some of the different types of teaching cases. But what is common to all of these is they're used for educational purposes. So, the emphasis of this workshop is discussion cases. Our goal is to expose participants to realistic situations. For my own part, I will not use a case that is made up. Now, in many cases, it makes sense to describe a case, to disguise a case, because sometimes organizations don't want their name out there, especially if it's going to be published. And normally in a discussion case, you're not talking about a situation that's embarrassing or a terrible decision that's been made. But nevertheless, some organizations may not want the public to know about the decision process they're going through. Or there may be sensitivity. So, for example, in Shane Collier's case, some of the names of organizations involved have been disguised for precisely that reason. even though the case description itself is pretty accurate. And I have to admit, Shane, I discovered when you described it, for the last 2 weeks looking at your case, I thought it was realty. I missed the itty in reality, and so I was thinking, jeepers, this is an awful disguise. He's talking about a real estate company doing this stuff. But it was supposed to be reality, so now all of a sudden I know. So, at any rate, the point is that in the world of complexity, we are not necessarily that good at describing complex situations without adding our own agenda to it. So I much prefer to go into an organization and have them tell me about the situation as they see it, rather than trying to make up a situation. The only time I use fictional cases is when I'm trying to illustrate principles of case writing. So in other workshops, I've used 3 cases, the 3 little pigs, A, B, and C, and each one of them demonstrate a different approach to the 3 little pigs problem. We won't subject you to that here. Discussion cases are designed to encourage higher level learning. For the most part, we're not interested in people memorizing facts, learning specific rules from these cases. Rather, through the discussion process, through the analysis process, what we're trying to do is we're trying to get them to synthesize information, to evaluate information, to come up with creative solutions. For those of you in education, if you've seen something called Bloom's taxonomy, there are 6 different levels of Bloom's taxonomy. Case studies sort of focus on the higher level, higher order learning. However, they don't ignore the other learnings, because basically anytime you want to propose something about a case, you want to grab facts from the case. So we can't eliminate things like understanding and knowledge and so forth, because those are part of the process. It essentially forces you to exercise all levels of the taxonomy. It also can provide a structured forum for sharing participant experiences. A few years ago, I was privileged to be the co-editor of a series of cases that specifically looked at the application of cases in real-world context as opposed to educational context. This was done with John Ickes, who was another person who I met at the Jeeves conference. And what happened is, one example that he gave was there was a situation in a South American country where basically the rebels, the unions, and the governments had all been at odds for years, and it looked like they might start to come together, but just getting them in the same room was a huge threat. So one of the things that was done very effectively is they took a case study of an Indonesian situation that was actually very similar to the situation in that country, and they had them discuss it. Well, it's a lot easier to be open when you're talking about those damned Indonesians as opposed to talking about people who are in the room with you and possibly armed. And in that way, they got a lot more information sharing taking place, and that actually led to at least a temporary detente between the different groups. My impression is it didn't last forever. Nothing's permanent in this world, but nevertheless, case studies provide a really interesting way of learning about the perspectives of the people in the room with you, as well as learning at the individual level. Typical discussion case in business. It's open, which means that more than one solution is likely to the problem. I have a lot of case studies that I've actually written about my own situations. These are sometimes referred to as selfies. And I've been told that no self-respecting case writer would ever write one, but I have no self-respect, so that works fine with me. And in many of these cases, the solution that I actually came up with for the problem was something that I would not recommend anyone else try. It just happened to be a good fit with my personality. And the idea is that there are lots of other solutions that get proposed during the discussions of these cases, and some of them would probably work much better for other people than they would work for me. And the idea is that you kind of fill in the blanks of context to come up with a solution. And a lot of these cases also include a lot of detail, and some of the details are probably not that relevant. Because in real-world decision-making, does it ever come with a map and say, these 3 facts are relevant and these 4 facts are not relevant? That's not the way real-world problems present themselves. And a lot of times, it's what facts you focus on that will drive the decision. As I mentioned, I like authentic cases because I am not a good enough student of human nature to be able to create a case from scratch that I believe is completely realistic. When I want to do that, I will start writing fiction. And by the way, I love fiction. I enjoy reading it. I'm just not convinced that it would necessarily mirror the reality. And frankly, some of my case studies are stranger than fiction anyway because they're real world. But the focus is a decision that needs to be made. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to give you some cybersecurity examples. And what we're going to try to do is figure out, would these be good discussion cases as written? Now, for those of you who have computers or cell phones, you will be able to vote, assuming that my internet holds up. And basically what you are doing is you are going to rate the suitability between suitable and unsuitable. And I can't remember which is A and which is B, but it'll be on the slide. So an organization provides network security services negotiating with a potential customer that seeks 100% protection from hackers. The owner is considering whether to accept the terms of the contract or what alternative terms to propose. So the question is, would this be, as written, a good discussion case topic? So you have 4 choices. A, I think, to very unsuitable, all the way to D, suitable. What you can do is, if you've got a computer, go to pollev.com/Grandon, and this should pop up. If you have a cell phone, you text Grandon to 37607, and then it'll pop up a menu and you can choose A, B, C, or D. And we'll see if, yes, okay, someone at least has succeeded. So website, pollev.com/Grandon. Usually they tell me how many hits we've had, but that's interesting. Okay, so yes. Okay, it's pollev.com/Grandon. I don't know if the www is going to be a problem or not, but try it. Okay, yep. And then basically it should keep tracking. So good. It's interesting, I must have some setting because it always used to give me the numbers, but at any rate, okay, well I don't want to wait too long on this. Oh good, we've got a nice split across the board. This is why I do this exercise, is because it sounds very easy, a decision that needs to be made, and it isn't always that way. So I would say right now, the unsuitables seem to have the strong edge. But we also have a little bump here in the suitables as well. So going back to the problem, I would say the key words, and you can keep doing this, but the key words is the owner is considering whether to accept the terms. Okay, that's a decision, yes, no, Or a third alternative, what terms to propose. That is, a fact, a decision. And in fact, this was the first cybersecurity case that we wrote. Specifically this, and it's actually up on the web. Obviously, 100% protection from hackers is completely implausible. But the question is there something that can be salvaged here? Okay, so we'll see how we do as we move on. Okay, malware detection algorithm. A scientist has developed an algorithm that has proven effective in identifying the presence that's supposed to be, of malware in network traffic. He wants to write a case that describes how the algorithm works and provide descriptive examples of its effectiveness. And by the way, the text on these is all in your handouts, so if you can't, if I go too fast. Yeah, this poll EV is pretty cool, isn't it? Yeah, and it's free. Up to 40 participants is free. So, and it's anonymous because you have to pay to actually get the names of what people submitted. So.
Is that on your campus there?
No, this is international. I've used it in South Africa and everything. Just go to pollev.com and you can sign up for an account, a free account. The one thing is, it used to give me how many people had done, so I know when to stop. Those percentages, I don't like to cut out people's votes. Okay, so it looks here as if, boy, I'll tell you, it's like 48% on the unsuitable side and 53% on the suitable side. Going back to now we're moving more towards the suitable. Going back to the question, what is missing here? He wants to write a case that describes how the algorithm works and provides descriptive examples of its effectiveness. There is no decision here. Now, this, in fact, is one of the cases we'll be talking about this afternoon. This is the case that I have not been able to finish because the real question is, he's made this discovery. This is Leonid Perlovsky, who many of you who've been to this conference have seen before. But this is not really his area of expertise or even his area of interest. So the question is, how can he move this forward? And my problem is I haven't been able to come up with any options for him because I don't really know enough about the subject. Remember, I'm a case study guy, not really a cybersecurity expert. And so that's one of the things that I'm hoping will come out of this afternoon's discussion is the way to finish up this case. So you're going to help me in the case writing process. Okay. Oh, yeah, now the unsuitables are jumping up. Yeah, oh, yeah. All right, authentication requirements. Customers of an organization that provides